Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today, as the TU15 PTS is now in the rear view with it closing down the other day, I've taken the opportunity to reflect on the 3 phases that we got, and I realized that, for all of the surprises and weirdness that we encountered in there, there's one thing that stuck out to me in particular that at least I haven't seen a lot of people talking about. Maybe conversations are occurring out there somewhere, but it was back in Phase 1, when we first were acquiring all of the new items and trying them all out, and that the Dare LMG, which is the named version of the new GR9 LMG that is coming with Season 9, had a different talent other than Perfect Flatline. Now, the devs later went on to say that this talent was present in the PTS in error. Myself and some others figured that it just hadn't been communicated yet, but alas, after Phase 1, it was just removed and never to be seen again for the duration of the PTS. And that talent and what it references is what I want to discuss today, because if it is to pop back up in another, Year 4 title update down the road, as I suspect it will, then we could see a whole new status vector type of combat system coming to the game, and I think that's pretty exciting. So let's get into it, starting with, what is this talent that I'm referring to? Well, back in Phase 1, before the Dare was properly given the Perfect Flatline talent, it originally came with a talent called Perfect Jeopardy, which had the following description, and I will throw this up on screen for you to look at as well. Headshots and weak point hits build and refresh stacks, which grant plus 20% vulnerability applied by weapons. One stack is removed every 3 seconds. Max stack is 50. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. Before we go on to talk about where or when we might see this talent again, let's break this down, this description, and speculate a bit on what it might mean both in isolation and for the larger game, because the talent was not working in Phase 1, I should say, so any discussion about its functionality is speculation at this point. So the talent is obviously functioning under the stack umbrella, similar to Striker, the new Heartbreaker set, all of those, and it's dealing with what is presumably a new type of status effect, or just type of effect to put an enemy under. I don't really know what the best terminology to describe this thing would be, but I think you all probably know what I'm trying to get at. Inflicting vulnerability would appear to be a new thing we're going to be able to do at some point in the future. The question then becomes, well, what does vulnerability do? Obviously, we won't know for certain until further confirmation, but among one of my guesses is that it's going to function as a sort of team-wide damage buff. What do I mean by that? Well, consider how the opportunistic talent works right now. You hit an enemy with a shotgun or a sniper, and they take increased damage from all sources for a short period of time. I have a feeling that vulnerability could be the new name for that sort of effect, and so not only will they bundle opportunistic into that new package, but the introduction of vulnerability will allow for this type of talent and effect to be more easily rolled out to new applications. So for this Jeopardy talent, my guess would be that inflicting vulnerability onto an enemy increases weapon damage, skill damage, and status effect damage, and anything else like that to a target for whatever value, in the case of Jeopardy, 20%, as it says. And I think that's pretty cool. Having a new outlet to increase team-wide damage could be huge for the build diversity meta, instead of tank supports purely relying on opportunistic to increase their team's damage output in that, kind of way. They can now potentially run this talent on their gun, or perhaps there will be new gear talents that incorporate it, stuff like that. The only part about the talent that confuses me slightly is the stack inclusion. If vulnerability is a damage buff against enemies with it, which again is not confirmed, that's just my best guess, then why involve stacks and not just apply that 20% debuff for a set amount of time? My guess would be perhaps to try and rein in its strength, because if a lot of high damage builds are running together and someone procs vulnerability on an enemy, that could get crazy pretty fast, especially in raids, legendaries, and whatnot. So perhaps the stack mechanic is here in a way to limit some of the uptime on that bonus. Maybe it's that if any member of your team hits the target, it removes 1 stack, and so that as long as any stacks remain on the target, then anyone has the ability to proc that 20% damage bonus, but either the inflictor will have to maintain a crazy uptime to maintain those stacks, or the window will be very short to get your damage in. That's just my best guess. Again, we're going to have to wait and see if this pops up in the future to know for certain, and that's kind of what I want to transition to now, is when and where we might see this talent and the vulnerability concept pop back up at. There is a precedent for stuff like this showing up on the PTS and then either coming back around after too long or just disappearing for good afterwards. I have a feeling it'll be the former, in this case for vulnerability, but for example, I recall back in the TU6 PTS, I believe it was, back around September of 2019, people were logging in and getting tutorial menus for the Guardians Global event, which at the time, we had no global events in the Division 2. People suspected they might be coming soon, and sure enough, 6 months down the road, they later were introduced in Title Update 8. So on the other hand, you then have the infamous SAW LMG from the Division 1, which was an incredibly powerful weapon that showed up in the, I want to say like the 1.6 PTS, and then it never made its way to the live game in any, future updates or any future PTSs. It just disappeared. Now, I have a feeling that Jeopardy will not follow that same path. I think there's a reason that it was initially tied to the Dare LMG, and that's what I want to discuss now. So we know that one aspect of the TU15 update got delayed, right? The specialization rework, something that I'm still very much looking forward to, by the way. But upon looking at this talent more for this video, I realized that it sounded awfully similar to something that we were expecting with that rework. If you'll recall, the devs communicated that their intent was to implement a new system in order to allow specialization weapons to deal additional or at least normal damage to named enemies and bosses. Whereas right now it says specifically in the spec tree that their damage is permanently nerfed against those enemies. So I went back and checked their wording, and this is what was said in the Intelligence Annex article regarding this specialization rework. For the signature weapons, we want to allow players to customize their behavior and to invest specialization points to increase the impact those choices might have. This would be a meaningless addition without the ability to make named enemies vulnerable to signature weapon damage, so we're implementing a system to make that possible. So look, maybe it's a coincidence, maybe I'm crazy, but they said that they're adding in a system to make enemies vulnerable. This Jeopardy talent applies vulnerability. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to wonder if the two are related, and it wouldn't surprise me in the least if originally the Kingbreaker was going to give you perfect flatline, and then the Dare was going to give you perfect Jeopardy, and both were going to come with Season 9 before they decided to delay the specialization rework. And so now that the spec rework was delayed, so was the implementation of this new vulnerability weapon talent. That's my pitch. So for when it will return, in my mind, it would make sense that it'll come whenever the spec rework does indeed hit the live servers, which at this point I think is pretty fair to assume is TU16 alongside Season 10, and it wouldn't surprise me in the least if Season's 10 theme is this whole new vulnerability system. In the same way that Season 9 is now pulse themed, Season 4 was skill themed, Season 3 was close quarter combat, you get the idea. So yeah guys, that's about all I have to report and speculate on for today. I'm very curious to get more answers on this stuff, especially after making some of these connections to the specialization rework. Questions like, does vulnerability perhaps only increase specialization weapon damage and not every type of damage source, as I previously suggested? That would be cool too, honestly. If coordinating with your team to say like, okay, you apply vulnerability to this target, I'll have my spec weapon ready to hit them, and will deal a crap ton of damage, combined. That's a very cool new addition to the gameplay loop, in my opinion, if that's how things do indeed play out. And it could really help revitalize specialization weapons as staples of combat in The Division 2, which they haven't really been in a long time. Additionally, I'll be curious to see the extent of where this vulnerability concept gets implemented. Like, will it only be on this Jeopardy talent? Will it be, on Gear Talents 2? Could it be incorporated into the Season 10 gear set? Will this stuff even be in Season 10? Is it actually tied to the specialization rework, or is the wording all just one big coincidence? There's a lot of questions that I don't have answers to right now, but I found all of this stuff super interesting and compelling, so I wanted to report it to you all, and I'm very keen to hear some of your thoughts on it. Thank you all so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on so you can be updated every time I upload. As I said, let me know all of your thoughts regarding this discussion and topic. What are your thoughts on this Jeopardy talent that briefly showed up in the TU15 PTS? Do you think it's tied to the specialization rework? Do you think it'll pop back up either in Season 10 or later in Year 4? Whatever you're thinking on any of that, let me know. And yeah, everybody, I'm glad I did this video. I love doing these little deep dive speculative things like this, so thanks for sticking through it. I appreciate you. And yeah, folks, that's just about going to do it for me today. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and until the next one, guys, RogueGold out.